Hey, have you noticed it lately? Maybe at the grocery store or when you're filling up your car. It just kind of feels like your money doesn't go as far as it used to, right? Well, you're not imagining it. Let's get into the powerful force that's been shrinking all of our wallets. Okay, just take a look at these numbers. They're pretty wild. Back in 1970, a gallon of gas was about 36 cents. In 2021, over $3. A new home has gone from what a decent car costs today to over $400,000. These aren't just little price hikes. This is a massive change in what a dollar can actually buy. So the question we're all asking is, what is going on here? It really feels like the value of our money is just evaporating into thin air. Where did it go? Well, the culprit has a name: inflation. And the key thing to get is that it's not just one thing getting more expensive. It's a general, and this is crucial, an ongoing rise in prices pretty much everywhere. To put it in perspective, a dollar today has about the same buying power that just 15 cents had back in 1972. But okay, if everything is getting more expensive, how in the world do you measure that? I mean, you can't just average the price of a gallon of milk and a new car, right? Well, this is where economists had to get a little bit creative. They came up with this idea they call a basket of goods and services. Just picture a giant imaginary shopping cart. And inside, you throw everything an average person buys in a year. We're talking food, gas, clothes, rent, the whole shebang. To measure inflation, they simply track how much it costs to buy that exact same basket year after year. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Not everything in that basket is treated equally. Think about it. If the price of bananas goes up 10%, it's annoying. But if your rent goes up 10%, that's a huge deal. And that's why housing makes up this massive 42% chunk of the basket. It's why swings in the housing market have such a giant impact on the official inflation number. But this whole basket method isn't perfect. It's got a couple of, let's call them blind spots. First, something called substitution bias. If steak gets super expensive, you're smart. You'll probably buy more chicken, but the basket isn't smart. It just keeps buying the expensive steak. And second, there's the quality bias. A car today, with its airbags and GPS, is way better than a car from 1970. The basket has a really hard time telling the difference between a price hike and a quality improvement. So what's the big takeaway here? Because of these biases, a lot of economists argue that the official inflation number, the one you hear on the news, might actually be a little bit higher than the real cost of living increase that you and I feel. Why? Well, because you're smarter than the basket. It's an imperfect system, for sure, but it's the best one we've got. So a little bit of inflation is one thing, but what happens when it's not just a little bit? What happens when it spirals completely and utterly out of control? Well, that's when you get a full-blown economic nightmare. I mean, just look at this. This isn't monopoly money. It's a real $100 billion banknote from Zimbabwe. And the most tragic part is that by the time this was printed, it was almost completely worthless. How worthless are we talking? In November of 2008, the monthly inflation rate in Zimbabwe hit 79.6 billion percent. And no, that's not a typo. Prices were doubling, on average, every 24 hours. Can you imagine? You'd get your paycheck and literally have to run to the store to spend it before it lost all its value. And this quote just brings the reality crashing down. Imagine needing a wheelbarrow full of cash, $550 million, just to buy a single loaf of bread. Teachers were earning trillions of dollars a month, but it was only worth about $1 a day. It's just mind-boggling. This, my friends, is hyperinflation. It's not just an economic problem, it's a total societal breakdown. Money becomes meaningless. Eventually, Zimbabwe had to completely abandon its own currency. It's a terrifying cautionary tale for why governments are so obsessed with keeping inflation under control. Okay, wow, that was an extreme case. So let's bring it back home to the more moderate inflation that most of us deal with. Because even that doesn't affect everyone the same way. It quietly creates winners and losers. And here's the core issue. Inflation isn't a tide that lifts all boats equally. It's way more complicated. It helps some people and it hurts others, and often feels completely random. It shuffles purchasing power around the economy without asking anyone's permission. So let's break that down. Who gets hurt? Well, if you're a saver with cash sitting in the bank, you're losing ground every single day as your money's buying power shrinks. Same goes for retirees on a fixed pension. But who gets helped? Believe it or not, people in debt. If you have a fixed rate mortgage, you're actually winning because you're paying back your loan with money that's worth less and less. And if you own assets that go up with inflation, like a house, your net worth could actually be growing. And if you want a perfect real-world example of who gets left behind, just look at the federal minimum wage. Sure, the dollar amount has gone up over the years, but when you adjust for inflation, when you look at what that money can actually buy, its purchasing power has fallen by about 30% since the late 1960s. It's a textbook case of wages not keeping up. Now, it's really important to remember that this isn't the first time the US has gone through this. We've had major bouts of inflation before, after both world wars, for instance, when demand just exploded. And of course, anyone who was around then remembers the painful double-digit inflation of the 1970s. What we're living through now is just the latest chapter in a very long story. Besides moving wealth around, inflation just creates confusion. I love this quote. It says, "Inflation is like a radio program received with considerable static. When prices are flying all over the place, it's hard to tell if something's more expensive because of a real shortage or just because of inflation. That static makes it incredibly hard for all of us, businesses and shoppers, to make smart decisions." And all of that brings us right here to today. This recent spike in prices has everybody asking the same two questions. What's causing this, and where are we headed from here? At the most basic level, the cause of inflation is actually incredibly simple. You can boil it all down to one single phrase: too many dollars chasing too few goods. That's really it. When everybody wants to buy stuff and there isn't enough stuff to go around, prices only have one way to go: up. And what we've seen lately is the perfect storm of that principle in action. First, you have all this pent-up demand from people who were stuck at home. Then you had government stimulus putting more cash into the system. And at the exact same time, you had global supply chains completely snarled up, make it hard to get anything. It's the perfect recipe for rising prices. So this leads us to the billion-dollar question that economists are fighting about right now. Is all of this just a temporary blip while the global economy reboots itself? Or is this the beginning of a return to the long, painful, high inflation years of the 1970s? The answer to that question is going to shape all of our financial futures. So what's the bottom line here? It's that inflation isn't just some abstract number you hear about on the news. It is a real, powerful, and often invisible force that is constantly shaping your savings, your wages, and your ability to plan for the future. And understanding how it works is the first and most critical step to navigating it.